Hello, everybody,
Greg.
and hello, Nate.
Hello, everybody. Oh, man, talking over each other already. Hey,
That's
Greg.
all right.
Hey, everybody out there on the internet. It's great to be back for another episode of our What's This Bird live series. We're happy to be here to talk about birds here in the winter months of February now. It's February. We're coming ever closer to spring migration, but we do have plenty of winter birds to talk about here. Greg, how are you doing? Not doing so well, as I understand it.
Yeah, I am. If I have a little cough or a sniffle, I am in the depths of a COVID infection here, and so just kind of motoring through this as best I can.
It is, yeah. I'm glad you're here. It's in my house as well. I don't have it yet, but I am nonetheless sequestered in my office so that I don't get it from my wife, who also has it. But
Sudafed is making it possible for me to be here right now.
Sudafed, yeah, God's medicine. Hope you
whatever.
The Lazarus pill.
February.
Welcome back, everybody. It is February. It's an oddly long February because it's a leap year, and so we're excited to come back and talk to you all about birds and birding. The American Birding Association hosts a bunch of Facebook groups, one of which is called What's This Bird? It is a friendly bird identification community, and we are excited to be a part of that. And in it, people can just take photos of birds. They take with their phone, they take with their camera, whatever. Post them up in this group, and we will identify those birds for people and help them become better birders and learn to do it on their own. Every once in a while, we do get some birds that we want to talk through a little bit more detail, and that's what these bi-weekly programs are for. They're also interactive, so we're excited to have you all here with us. You are a part of the program as well. If you have any questions, comments, any of that stuff, please let us know. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. We'll be keeping an eye on the comment sections in both of those places. And we are excited to chat birds with you all this afternoon or morning, I guess, depending on where you are on the North American continent.
I think if it's all the same to you, and well, I don't even know where I was going with that. I said I'm a little scramble brained here today.
Yeah,
but Gavin Alving says hello. Hi, hi, Gavin.
We Facebook. Have well wishes of good health from the folks in YouTube, from Rachel Brenner and Julie McQuaid.
Thank
Greg,
you.
I hope you get better soon. Boris Belchev is here from Lithuania. Hello. I should have expected you and known how to say welcome in Lithuanian. I will try and solve that by next time around. But we're glad you're here. It's late in the evening there for you. But yeah, hopefully I don't think we have any Eurasian old world birds to chat here. But
no, it's after an amazing, and I mean just like jaw-dropping, gobsmacking, however you want to describe it, beginning of the winter in terms of rarities and interesting birds. It's just kind of like settled down to, okay, those birds are still there, and everybody who wants them has got them.
There are more rare birds in South Texas right now than there have been anywhere else in the country, in the continent, U.S. and Canada, for the whole first month of the year.
But I mean, even Florida with that yellow-headed caracara, and I mean, there have been other things around, but I mean, it just, for a while there in December and early January, it was simply amazing.
Yeah, what was the crane hawk? Was the crane hawk in place last time we were around? I can't remember. Everything sort of runs together.
I don't think it had been
I think it was last week. Yeah,
I think it was found right after the last time we did one of these.
Yeah, last Monday, I believe, because I was recording a podcast on the day that it came out.
And that's a spectacular bird.
I've seen him
in Costa
raptor.
Rica.
Yeah,
and it's just such a cool bird.
Yeah, they've got. I don't know if folks know this, but there's a crane hawk, maybe two crane hawks, in the lower valley of Texas right now. It's the second record for the ABA. I heard rumors that there might be two.
Maybe two. I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, but they're so cool. They have these super long, gangly legs that are actually double jointed that allow them to stick their legs into crevices and holes and pull out critters to eat. which is a really neat adaptation that is shared by African harrier hawks.
Mm-hmm.
But they are not closely related to African harrier hawks. It's an example of convergent evolution, which is very cool. Yeah, Rachel Brenner says, never
Yeah.
thought the roadside hawk would be the second best raptor in the area. Third, if you count the mottled owl, but I guess that hasn't been seen in a while.
Yeah. Um. So I think we're just gonna dive right into it, and
Yeah, let's
we
do
may
it, Greg.
cut this one
We'll
just a
run
little
through
bit
it.
short.
Greg,
Um,
we're working on borrowed time with Greg, but
we are. I, it may be time for some meds soon, and face down on the couch. Um,
it's
all
Friday.
right.
At least it's
So
Friday, Greg.
it is Friday.
Hey,
First of all,
Mia McPherson's here.
Oh, hi, Mia.
Sorry, I'm jumping in. I'm interrupting.
That's fine. No, before we get to some birds, want to let you make you aware of our travel program, which
Oh, sure,
is
yeah.
quite honestly, without yeah, it's my job and everything, but these are some of the best birding tours that you can get. Katinka Doman puts together our travel program, and she is just a master at it. And these tours are fantastic. And we've got two coming up this spring: Hawaii in April and Belize in March. There are spaces available on both of these if you have been thinking about getting to the tropics to do some birding or just need to get out. Boy, that's going around the back of my mind a lot right
Belize,
now.
Belize is a fantastic introduction to neotropical birding for people who are kind of looking to get their feet wet. It's a great first destination because it's easy to get around. They speak English, and the birds there are a great mix of the kind of birds that you might see elsewhere in Mesoamerica. So Belize is a great place to go. I've never been, but I've been around around Belize, but not actually at Belize. And Hawaii.
Yeah.
What can you say about Hawaii? A lot of great birds there. Some you might want to see sooner rather than later if that's a thing you care about.
Yeah,
so.
Boy, that's another topic of discussion. But we will jump right into our first bird here.
Let's identify some birds.
Let's identify some birds here. So this comes from Key Largo, Florida. Now, this is a weird looking bird. And
yeah, this one is going to be made more difficult based on when the field guide you are using was published, because this is a bird that when I started birding was not in the field guides, but it is absolutely in all modern field guides to the United States. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and there's some things that you'll kind of notice right off the bat. The shape is vaguely familiar, vaguely reminiscent. It's got those sturdy legs and kind of a spike-like bill. The tail's a little cut off there in the photo, but we can see, I think, 90%.
Not much. It's pretty short.
Much. I mean, it's got a short tail.
Yep.
And this is in South Florida. Is
free flying
like Southern
aviary
California
down there.
Is a free flying aviary, exactly. And in addition to all the birds that you may be familiar with, there's a whole host of introduced species that you have to become familiar with too, and this is one of them.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. You're gonna find it near your starlings. It is, and starling itself is an old world species that was introduced in the 1800s into North America and has since spread all the way across the continent and is quite common. So, that's a great place to look. You're gonna find this one in the same parts. The starling is a Myna.
Yep.
And Myna have been very, commonly kept as cage birds for a long time because they are quite adept at mimicking human speech. And this one is, the common Myna,
Yep.
and I mean that both in a capital C fashion and a lowercase c fashion. Have you seen common Myna in the ABA area, Greg?
I don't think so. No, I don't think I have. I haven't been to South Florida. The last few times I've been to Florida, it's been around Merritt Island.
So this is a bird that has kind of blown up in South Florida in particular in the last couple decades. There used to be very localized, and now they are all over the place. I actually got my lifer common Myna not all that long ago in the ABA area, I should say. I've birded in Central Asia, and they are all over the place like you would expect in a lot of those places. But I got my first common Myna in the ABA area in the parking lot in a boiling hot parking lot in Miami, Florida, when I was birding with the birding by bus friends. I had like an 8 hour layover in the Miami airport, and I wanted to go out and get some exotics, and so we did the exotic tour, and we kind of ran around trying to get all the non-native birds, and common myna was one that we found pretty easily. We also got
Yeah.
the bulbul and a couple different parakeets there as well. First lifer in Australia, yeah, it was my first lifer in India as well. It was actually in the airport terminal at the baggage claim. There were mynas inside the building.
Gavin asks about the last date when common myna
Or crested myna.
or crested myna, sorry,
Another one that was introduced
in Vancouver. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I do know that if you go to the ABA
wasn't
checklist,
all that long ago.
So that's aba.org/checklist, and go through the checklist reports, you will find when it was removed from the checklist, and that will give you the answer to that.
Yeah. So some people have put, well, just a couple more things about mynas. Some people have pointed that they are in the modern field guides. They are absolutely, but if you go back, far enough, you'll find field guides that do not have mynas, which is not a major problem. It is a minor problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one comes to us from Sonora, Mexico. And we've been getting more. We've been getting more from Mexico lately. It seems like there's a fair number of people living in Mexico that are.
Well, we've been getting a lot of Mexican birds in the United States lately.
Well, that's true.
We talked about a few of them.
And the person asked what type of crow this was, and
based on this angle, not the worst. Impression. But the thing about Sonora, Mexico, is I do not believe there are any crows down there. So you get to a certain point, and there are no crows anymore. They
exactly
put off there in Mexico somewhere.
And
it was Tamaulipas crow in eastern Mexico, but
yeah. So
Bhutan,
I mean, the
Lithuania, Bhutan. My goodness, we got visitors.
Wow, people up late tonight. The first thing I see on this bird is a yellow eye or a pale eye, depending on how you want to call it. And that just rules out the crows, at least the North American crows, 100%.
Yeah.
But looking at this bird, it's kind of hefty.
It's chunky.
The angle kind of foreshortens the tail. It's got a big bill.
Absolutely.
So let's compare this great-tailed grackle with an American crow.
Great-tailed grackle. Basically the crow equivalent across much of Mesoamerica. Like the crows kind of wink out in northern Mexico, and then great-tailed grackles basically do the crow thing. So
yeah,
it's a reasonable thing to assume that the big blackbird that's walking around poking at garbage and dead things is what you see when you're back at home in the United States. It's a crow there, here, but it's a great-tailed grackle there.
Yeah, so we've got a crow here on the left, an American crow, and great-tailed grackle on the right. And the thing you can see right away is look at the wing length, compared to the tail. Look at how short the wing feathers, the primary feathers, are on that grackle, and just how long they are on the crow. The wingtip comes almost to the tail tip, and the crow is even heftier still than the grackle. The bill's a little bit shorter, and of course it's got the feathered nares, the feathering on top of the bill.
You should have thrown a Sinaloa crow up there, Greg,
and the dark eye,
because people are pointing out correctly. I got that wrong. That Sinaloa crow is a bird that would be seen in this part in Sonora, Mexico, and it's a very glossy little, lanky crow, not quite different than the more compact American crows that we see more commonly. But I admit I don't know much about Sinaloa crow. If it's anything like Tamaulipas, I would think it would be. Well, I'm not going to go saying things I don't know anything about, but I think great-tailed grackle is definitely a common parking lot kind of nasty habitat kind of bird that you would see in places that you might expect to see an American crow here in the United States and Canada. Oh, it is.
Uh,
Rubbish dumps, villages. I'm reading the eBird account on Sinaloa Crow.
yeah, kind of the same habitat as the Grackle.
Yeah,
Um,
it looks awfully similar.
so now we're
Dark
this
eye
one
though.
comes to us from Pea
Dark eye.
Island, North Carolina. It's obviously a duck. Um, First thing I see is it's dark and it has a yellow bill, and
A lot of
that
birds like that at Pea Island this time of year. Great
yeah,
duck diversity on the Outer Banks.
there is, and the yellow bill right away rules out female mallard. So we can just get rid of that. Female mallard has an orange bill with sort of a dark greenish, blackish saddle. Um, and so this bird is not a female mallard. But let's compare it with, and we're gonna give it away here in a second.
We're not even gonna pretend to.
We're not
Well,
gonna.
look. So we talk before we give it away. I will say, we talked a lot last time around about profiles of ducks and how that can be a very useful way to identify
Absolutely.
ducks. In particular, we were talking about it in the context of a gadwall photo that we were trying to
Mm-hmm.
identify. So gadwall is a big, kind of bulky, square-headed looking dabbling duck. This bird looks a little bit different. The body is much bigger and deeper and longer
Mm-hmm.
than a gadwall, and makes the head look a little bit smaller. When we talk about size, a lot of the times what we're talking about, and I've said this many times before on this program, is proportion. We're talking about proportion more than size. That makes the bird look large because the head looks small in comparison to that body. But it's all over just kind of a smallish, rounded head, and a long, large bill that puts it in sort of the mallardy sort of category, of which there are a couple options in Pea Island
Yeah,
this
and
time of
it's kind
year.
of butt on, so that's sort of enhancing the size of the bird's body
For sure, it's got a big
compared to
back
the
end.
head. But
Baby got back for sure.
so we're going to compare this American black duck with a mottled duck, and the first thing you'll notice is the mottled duck is mottled, whereas the black duck does appear kind of black, very dark brown,
Yeah, not
and
black itself, but at a distance, yeah,
at a
it looks
distance.
very, very dark. Yep.
Um, black ducks are variable, but they're even a young or female black duck is not going to be as mottled and brown looking as a mottled duck.
Yeah.
Mottled duck is, as you were talking about, the shape is a bit more gracile. It's
Yeah,
thinner.
I would say that that's accurate.
It's longer necked. It tends to have a longer bill.
Hmm.
And it's just overall a little bit longer and lankier. Um, Also, I mean, if you can get a good shot of it like this, and this black duck has a little bit of schmutz at the base of the bill, and that's kind of like that can throw off this field mark. But you'll notice the mottled duck has a little black spot at the base of its
Hmm.
bill, and that is a field mark for mottled duck.
Yeah, generally.
But
And I will point out, knowing status and distribution is a useful thing for these birds as well. Because this is in my uh, backyard, I can say that black duck, very common at Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge. And of course, all over the Outer Banks this time of year. Mottled duck would be exceptionally rare that far north. We do get them in North Carolina semi regularly, but they do tend to stay down along the southern coast, along the border with South Carolina. So I'd be shocked to see, well, I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be mildly surprised to see a mottled duck at Pea Island, though I don't think that it would be completely impossible. But there are certainly a
yeah,
lot of black ducks and a lot of mallards in those impoundments right now.
yeah, and one other thing, and this is something that's pointed out in the field guides. But the black duck does have a paler head than its body, but
Hmm.
not like mottled duck.
No,
It's
no.
much more distinct in
And
mottled
generally
duck.
not even like female mallard too, if
Right.
you see the bill. They look black. I
Linda
mean,
Hodges asks, "How does the Mexican duck compare to black duck?" Um,
woo
because we are dealing with Pea Island, North Carolina, I did not throw
Yeah,
Mexican duck into
no
the
Mexican
mix.
ducks here.
But
I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't think
when
we
we
know
get
about vagrancy in Mexican ducks because no one wants to identify them.
yeah, well, that's true. If you go to our website, we do have a great aba.org/identification. We do have a really good article. I think it's like 13 or 15 pages long by 2 or 3 different authors about Mexican duck identification. And it's it's complicated, maybe a bit beyond the scope of this program.
Yeah.
But who knows? We might throw one up one of these days if it comes across us.
Yeah,
our
for
path.
sure. These mallard-ish ducks are way more complicated than we give them credit for, and not just because of the identification, but the genetics are kind of a mess because they do kind of interbreed sort of regularly with each other, and some of them that we think of as their closest relatives are not always their closest relatives. The 2 mottled duck populations, the one that is based in Florida and the one that is in the Western Gulf, are not their own, not each other's closest relative, which is wild, which means they should probably be split. But when that happens, I mean, how are you going to go about identifying those birds? And to throw even more kind of local complication into the mix, the mottled ducks that are along the coast of South Carolina are actually mostly introduced mottled ducks that were introduced for hunting purposes. And those mottled ducks, people think that they come from Florida. No, those are actually mottled ducks from the Western Gulf that they brought over to South Carolina to release as hunting birds. And yeah, it's a giant
those
genetic
birds
mess.
those birds tend to be darker than the Florida birds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the mottled ducks that we get in North Carolina tend to be those kind of Western Gulf that kind of squirt up and from South Carolina where they're somewhat resident. It's wild.
Gavin says that Mexican duck is lumped with mottled duck in by HBW, and I'm like
Handbook of Birds of the World. Yeah,
and I'm like, what's that? A cable network?
I wish we had a cable network that was all birds all the time. We might be able to get jobs, Greg.
Oh, I forgot to label this one. Like I said, I'm not operating at 100.
I'm gonna guess
100%.
Somewhere in the eastern half of the continent.
It is in the eastern half of the continent. I believe it may have been North Florida.
Okay.
But it's definitely in the east. And so we've got what looks to me like a sparrow. I think most people,
it's smallish. I mean, you can tell by the blades of grass. It's streaky. It's brownish, various shades of brown. This one's kind of a really nice yellowy beige across most of its body with some nice dark central. The center of the back, the tertials or the feathers on the mantle are kind of a neat pattern there. Yeah, but it's small, brown, and streaky. So Sparrow is a good
crisply patterned bird.
Yeah, it's got what appears to be a relatively thick-based bill, short, thick-based bill. Classic Sparrow, classic New World Sparrow. Right? Yeah.
So Claire asks if it's a swamp sparrow, and we are about to get to that. So part of the reason, this is a bird, a group of these North American sparrows. I think there's 2 or 3 different genus. The ones I'm going to talk about are in at least 2 different genuses. But
Genera.
They are kind of confusing. Genera, sorry. They are kind of confusing. And what I want to focus on today is the head pattern, the face pattern. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to take a look at this Savannah sparrow compared to...
You're not even going to pretend to not know it this time.
You know what?
Jump straight into it.
I'm going to be honest. I'm kind of motoring through this, guys. Like I said, it's not going to be a long show today because I'm kind of...
He's under the weather. Greg is under the weather.
I'm failing. I don't have my COVID test here, but let's just say when I did the test, that test red line lit up like immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Like within the first
time I
40
got it
seconds.
was like that.
I am definitely full of the virus right now. So the thing that I like to point out about Savannah sparrow and all of these sparrows here in the face pattern is to compare the supercilium, that is the eyebrow stripe, with the malar stripe, which is sort of the mustache stripe. And if you look at the Savannah sparrow, they're essentially the same color and tone that frames the brown cheek. And then if you compare that with the song sparrow, to the right
Different
at the top,
colors.
it has a kind of a bold supercilium, but the face is mostly gray. It's got a gray supercilium. It has a gray cheek with that kind of bold white supercilium or mustache stripe. Yeah, Lincoln Sparrow is a lot like a song sparrow. The
Similar.
malar is buffier, although that's really
Yeah, they're
variable.
kinda,
I mean, you'll
yeah.
see, you'll see song sparrows that are patterned a lot like Lincolns, but not so fine. Look at the bill shape now,
Mm-hmm.
that little neat eye ring, and just how sort of well drawn. What's the
Yeah, Song Sparrow, what the streaks are with a crayon. Lincoln Sparrow, the streaks are
bingo?
drawn with a freshly sharpened pencil. Also, I really like the color. The color to me, the overall color of Lincoln Sparrow always stands out. They're this lovely kind of olivey gray brown that is just really, really distinctive and really, really smart looking. I think
Absolutely.
compared to Song Sparrows, which can be kind of not that Song Sparrows aren't a nice sparrow, but they can be kind of more
No.
coarsely drawn, I suppose. Uh,
Yeah.
just generally
Well,
speaking.
it's like you said, it's a pastel drawing or a crayon drawing versus a fine, pencil drawing.
Yeah.
Then going down to Vesper, yeah, Vesper Sparrow is it's a bigger bird. It's got a
Mm-hmm.
bigger bill than any of the birds we're looking at, but it almost has no supercilium at all. The face is very
Mm-hmm.
plain,
Plain. Yep.
except for that weird sort of cheek pattern, which is kind of
Yeah.
made up of three different blotches. And it has a malar that's not quite as well defined as some of the others here. It almost gives it a more of a long spur kind of a look than
Yeah, I
these
agree with
other
that.
sparrows.
There are some Savannah sparrows, particular some in the east, which can be quite pale, like Vesper sparrow, but they never are quite as plain, I suppose, on the face as Savannah sparrow. They've always got something going on the face. Savannah sparrow does, whereas Vesper sparrow, as you say, can look quite not a lot going on, especially up around the eye, further back on the ear and the chin. There's some pattern there, but they stand out as very plain faced when you see them,
Yeah,
sitting on a power line or something.
yeah, and swamp sparrow. It's you're probably not going to mistake if you get a good look at it. You're not going to mistake a swamp sparrow for a Savannah sparrow.
Yeah, they're very
Um,
richly colored.
Yeah, they are. It's got more rufous on it, but there are some
Mm-hmm.
Savannah sparrows that have a lot of rufous in the wing panel. Not really on the tail. So swamp sparrow tends to have some rufous on the
Mm-hmm.
tail. It's overall just a darker, grayer bird, but it's also got that thinner bill than the song sparrow. But the Savannah has kind of a small. It's not really thin. It's just petite and
Mm-hmm.
almost always pink bill.
Mm-hmm.
And you see
And
that, huh?
I was gonna say, the shape just in general of the bird strikes me as quite different when, especially when we're talking about the Melispisas like swamp
Yeah,
lincolns and song. They are, shorter winged, much longer tailed, especially song sparrow, which when it flies, it looks like it's dragging that tail around like a flatbed trailer or something.
yeah.
But Savannah sparrow is relatively long winged, relatively short tailed, and a very quick flyer, and very fast flyer. Both quick and fast, I suppose, would mean the same thing, but in this sense, I think of them somewhat differently. But yeah, the shape of the birds, just generally speaking, is quite different. So the Melispisas can be a little more pot bellied, bigger bodied, whereas Savannah is just so sleek and slim.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have two different
Lincoln
birds.
versus Swamp. Laura Leffler wants to do Lincoln versus Swamp just real quickly. Hey, Carl, our new colleague, Carl Bendorf, in the comments.
Hey, Carl. Lincolns versus Swamp. All right, we can back up to that. Um, well, the first thing to notice is the really overall gray that Nate was mentioning, that sort of olivey gray. It's a
Yeah, they're
unique
kind of
color.
olivey. Yeah.
And the Lincolns has a bit more of an eye ring, and swamp sparrow actually, what it's most confused with, young
Yeah, I
swamp
was just
sparrow
gonna say
is
this. Yep,
white-throated sparrow.
white-throated sparrow. That's exactly right.
And it's really, if you see a swamp and a Lincoln's, really, or a Lincoln's, you're not likely to confuse those two as much as you would a white-throated with a swamp sparrow or a Lincoln's with a song sparrow.
Yeah.
And I have seen some Lincolns that I have seen some birds, and we'd say this all the time, that you can't, you just got to let them go. And I have seen some of those birds where it's just like, well, boy, it's a young bird, and I can't really tell what it is.
I always think of Lincolns as more of an upland bird,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of drier. Maybe it's just where I see them, where I am. Whereas swamp is almost always there's gonna be some water somewhere, be it
Yeah, I mean,
a seep or wet grass or something. They call them swamp sparrow for good reason. Like there's usually going to be some sort of still water somewhere around where you see them.
but I'm an urban birder and in Chicago, and I see all these sparrows on park
Oh, you see them
lawns,
together. Yeah.
in the morning. Like, you get a nice flight of birds and you go out in the park first thing in the morning and you'll have, you know, flocks of mixed sparrows.
Mm.
And, I've had as many as, like 6 or 8 different species of sparrows and related birds all bopping around on the lawn together. And so, in that kind of a situation, the habitat, especially like in city parks and stuff, habitat really doesn't factor in so much. But having said
It
that,
tends to be more homogenized. Yeah.
if there is like a pond or something, you're most likely going to find the swamp sparrow along the edges of the pond,
Yeah.
or as close to that as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so these two come from Florida, and the person on the left, or the person who put the photo up on the left, asked if it was a bittern. And these two were almost back to back, two different people. And the reason I picked it is because they both show so well what I call just a slam dunk field mark for this bird. So what do you see in Nate?
I'm seeing a wading bird for sure. Kind of a compact wading bird, just based on how it's holding itself. I think of wading birds kind of in two categories. There's the long neck, long billed ones like great blue heron, great egret, all the medium sized egretta birds, and then you've got these little compact ones, which are usually night herons. Although yellow crowned night heron can be kind of lanky too. But the bitterns certainly, and
Yeah.
green heron is in there too. So this looks like one of the small herons, certainly. Bright yellow legs, long dark bill.
Mm-hmm.
Lot of green on that bird, a lot of rufous on the bird, especially when the one on the
Yeah,
right.
that sort of burgundy color, with the dark bluish greenish back, and the bright yellowish, which turn orange in spring when they're breeding. Those all add up to green heron. And one of the things I learned as a kid birder is, when you get a dark bird that kind of looks a little crowish or whatever, that flies away from you from the edge of a pond, sometimes they'll make this like squawk noise as they go, but you see these bright yellow or orange feet sticking out the back. Instantly identify that as a green heron. But the field mark that interested me here was the white malar, and you can see it clearly in both of these birds. That's a juvenile on the left and an adult on the right, and you can see right at the base of the gape of the bill there's just this rather short white line that just stands out on the face. And so here we're going to compare it with least bittern and American bittern, and you can see that while they both have white on the throat, all three of them have white on the throat, only the green heron has that little white sort of mustache stripe at the base of the bill. And if you get a small heron and you see that, you got a green heron pretty much.
Yeah. Alex Cruz, thanks for commenting. Notes that in Minnesota, late summer, people often confuse immature greenies with least bittern, which is, as you posted here in this comment. One of the things between those two species that I think a lot of people don't realize is that when you see a little, you got me doing it, a least bittern, it because that is an impossibly small heron. It's one of those birds that you look at it in the field guide and you think, oh, this is a bird that's roughly the size of a green heron, which is a small heron, but mallard body, the size is mallard sized ish. But least bittern is like the thing is the size of a robin. The body
I
is
was
the
just
size
gonna
of a
say a
robin.
robin.
It
Yeah.
is a little bird, and until you see one, you don't really appreciate how small that thing is. Like they feel like they should not even be a thing. It's like a toy. It's a toy heron. It's
Yeah.
it's wild.
Yeah. I mean, when you see them, and when you're looking for bitterns, or just at a marsh where you know there's least bitterns, especially at the end of the day when the sun is starting to go down, look at the base of the cattails at the edge of the water, and take your scope and just scan along there very slowly and carefully, because the least bitterns will come out and grab the reeds,
Yeah, do
like
the splits.
that,
Yeah.
but they're so much smaller than you think,
Yeah.
and once you see one, you're like, oh. That's really
they're
really
easy to
small.
miss because you might
They
not
are.
expect something that tiny. Yeah. It's a cool bird. I was in South Carolina last year, birding the Pinckney Island National Wildlife Refuge, and I was walking around near this big heron rookery that you walk out to, and around it is this tall grass. And it's not, I mean, it's tallish grass, I should say. It's probably about 4 to 6 inches high. And I was walking down this path, and I actually flushed a least bittern that was walking in the grass, and it popped up and flew off, and like it was so small that it was hiding in that grass that couldn't have been
Yeah.
much more than 4 inches high. And I popped it up. It was
And when
cool
you
stuff.
see them flying away from you like that, they're also immediately identifiable.
Yeah,
by
they've
these
got big old patches
huge,
in their wings. Yep.
huge buffy patches on the wings.
Yep. Yep.
And in the spring they're particularly bright. So you really can't mistake that. Okay, these two come from Alabama.
Oof. It's actually a tougher photo than you might think.
It is and it isn't. And I think, Nate, you're on to why I picked this one. So we've got two birds here. Really, we can't tell very much about the bird on the right at all. It's brown.
It's brown.
Looking at the overall shape and apparent size of the bird on the left, and the feeder and the little chain that's holding the feeder up, I think we can say that this is like a small sort of, I don't know, sparrow, finch sized sort of bird.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of brown with some red on the face and a bright red rump.
Right.
And that like rules out most of the birds that might be in Alabama.
Yeah, for sure. This is a common bird in the South. Well, a common bird just about everywhere in the continent these days. And it's if I did not, well, I'll cut to the chase. It's house finch is the bird that we're looking at. But I will say when you first pulled up this photo, when I first saw it, there's another kind of reddish red rumped bird that came to my mind, and based on the fact that thing, it can't really see the bill very well. Red crossbill looks a little bit like this. If you see it from the back.
It does. Red crossbill, I think, even in this picture, would show a little more streaking or at least pattern on the back.
I agree, and also the tail would be shorter and the wings would be much longer. Yeah,
exactly. The tail is much too long. Those short primaries and the long tail, that's pure house finch, and purple finch has longer wings and a shorter tail as well. So this view, but the thing that threw the person off is the weird bill, or at least what appears to be the bill. And it's not, of course. We can't see the bill because the bird is facing almost directly away from us, but it's chowing down on a sunflower seed.
Yeah.
And that's what's sticking out
manipulating
the side of
the
its face.
sunflower seed to get it in its bill such that it can bite down on it and crack that thing open and get to the delicious sunflower meat inside.
Gavin
just like
said
your eye at a baseball
possibly
game.
Painted bunting. Painted bunting wouldn't have as long of a tail, and it would show some green.
It would be more green.
I
think it's not the greatest photo. It's a little bit soft, but I think I would expect to see at least some green on there as well. Yeah.
I mean, we can see the green leaves back there, so we know the color balance is
the color's accurate.
At least somewhat accurate. Yeah, which is a big issue with a lot of these images that we get.
Seed-billed house finch, says Rachel Brenner. Yes,
that's exactly what it is.
All the hyphens. Hyphen between seed-billed and house and finch.
So now we're going to go to Southeast Michigan, And
Greg, it's a swamp sparrow.
it's exactly, we're going to go right back to that. And
Sparrow season.
I think that since we've already talked about it a fair amount, we're just going to cut to the chase with this one. This
Greg,
is
before we get to this one,
yes.
Pam Colber Zika keeps asking, how do you decide what birds we want to discuss? Greg's the one that picks the birds.
Yeah,
We usually just scroll through the feed and grab a few. That's pretty much it.
No, what I mean, there's a little more thought.
That's
to
how
it
I
than
used
that.
to do
So,
it. Greg
yeah,
clearly puts in more thought than I do.
I go through the feed and I take into account what we've talked about before, particularly in the last program. When I see images that are particularly relevant to the time of year we're in, and this one is a great example because in a lot of the East, people are seeing what this bird is. I'll just blurt it out here. It's a white-throated sparrow, but it's a young bird. And it's got a lot
Streaky.
it's got a mottling and streaking on it. The pattern of a white-throated sparrow is not really all that apparent, again, because it's a young bird. And as we were talking about earlier, white-throated and swamp sparrow, that's the pair that we see in What's This Bird that's most often confused.
And depending on how your settings on your camera or the lighting that is outside when you are taking the photo, sometimes they can look very similar. So when you have a single photo, that can be difficult sometimes for a species pair that you might not have issue with when you're in the field.
Exactly, and the field guide will point out that white-throated sparrow has a little bit of yellow in the lore, the space between the eye and the bill, which they do, and it's very bright in the spring. But that varies in the winter depending on how old the bird is and what shape the plumage is in. But swamp sparrow can also show some yellow in the face there as well.
A little bit, yeah.
But look at the shape of the bills first of all. The swamp sparrow has this longer, more sort of more slimmer, more pointed bill, whereas the white-throated has a thicker bill, and the broad supercilium on the white-throated is usually it's either whitish or kind of buffy-ish.
There are two populations of white-throated sparrows, kind of famously. You'll see birds that are very white on the eye line, or not the eye line, but the eyebrow, and some that are buffy tan. And that's not indicative of age. It's not indicative of sex. It's just that there are two populations, tan birds and white birds, and they make up they're about 50-50. And interestingly enough, both males and females can be tan, both males and females can be white, but typically when they breed, a tan bird will almost always choose a white bird, so that they will be, depending on, and the sex doesn't matter. It can be a tan male and a white female, or a white male and a tan female, but they always sort of find each other. There's some interesting hierarchy that has to do with both the sexes and the color forms, that is really interesting with white-throated sparrow if you want to really dig into that. But that's generally the rule.
Yeah. And just to finish up the ID there, you'll notice the swamp sparrow has rufous in the wing and the tail that you can usually see. The white-throated usually shows some kind of wing bars. It might be wing dots like on this one, but swamp sparrow typically doesn't show that. And of course, the thing that confuses people is that they both have rather bright white throats. And, if you're walking through some habitat and they pop up and face you,
they're frequently together. Yeah.
And they are frequently together, and both of them will show this white throat. And both of them will have a little bit, in this plumage, will have a little bit of mottling or streaking on the breast. So
that gray collar on the swamp sparrow, that is generally in the swamp sparrow and not white-throated, I should say. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, I always think of there being more gray in a swamp sparrow than a white-throated sparrow.
We are at the end of our birds, and as I said, I've got to go collapse here in a few minutes. If you are an ABA member, get over to ABA Community and join the discussion. That is our member-only social media experience. We've got thousands of ABA members there. and lots of fun stuff. If you are not, I got
I
it.
appreciate that you've made it easier, Greg, for me to find the aba.org/join, because when you put us side by side, I can never remember which side I'm supposed to point to. So this works well. Yeah, aba.org/community is great. Well, we have a lot of, it's one of the great resources that we and the American Birding Association provide to the birding community. Please come over and check us out.
Yes, and if you enjoy this and all the other things we do, the ABA American Birding Podcast, which I think is
Free.
one of the finest out there, please consider joining and be part of the club, because we would love to have you.
Absolutely. And we'll be back in a couple weeks for another round of What's This Bird Live. Please go to aba.org and scroll all the way down. You can sign up to our Flight Calls newsletter, and you can get a heads up when we're about to do it. We'll usually give you at least 24 hours warning. Maggie does a great job getting that newsletter out and even beating the 24-hour heads up most of the time. So check that out, and we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll see you then, everybody.
We'll see you then. Thanks, all.
Bye-bye.